In 1985, Grover Krantz presented a scientific paper at the Third International Congress of Systematic and Evolutionary Biology. The purpose of this paper, to provide Sasquatch with a scientific name. Ultimately retitled A Species Named from Footprints, his argument went thus: "We appear to have compelling evidence for a currently living specimen of the discovered fossil species Gigantopithecus, the living specimen referred to as Sasquatch. Due to the similarities of this reported and highly evidenced current animal and the best educated and calculated reconstruction of Gigantopithecus, rather than follow the time-honored procedure of bestowing a formal taxonomy only following the procurement of a holotype specimen, the proposal is to reverse this process. Agree that we have got the type specimen in the fossils already recovered, and formally attribute the name of this previously thought to be extinct species to Sasquatch due to the type evidence it is leaving behind. And should future discoveries show this equation of the two to be incorrect, here are some alternative taxonomic designations suggested instead." Krantz still encouraged future recovery of physical remains. However, he argued that it was equally important that serious scientific investigation be made of the already existing evidence of the creature. He compared the doing so to previous cases of fossil species being identified from the physical imprints these animals once made on their environments, such as imprints of bones, shells, hair, scales, feathers, and footprints, despite the lack of actual remains. He made a very valid point with this paper, but his request to formally assign Gigantopithecus to Sasquatch still was hypocritically not permitted due to there being no physical remains. Krantz would then attempt to have his paper published in an academic journal, and again met with rejection. It would ultimately land in the Northwest Anthropological Research Notes, Volume 19. Now, I hope I am making the hypocritical rejection by these organizations clear. The scientific community has recognized other animals based on their imprints alone, based solely on the evidence that the animal ever existed. And in regards to Bigfoot, one could argue we have never had so much evidence for a creature before. And along with Krantz, I have no doubt if we applied the same scientific enthusiasm and grant money to the study of the creature that is being evidenced, an actual official and funded search could be made for it, and it would be discovered in no time. If it's there, it would be. And the evidence says the animal is there. So, what's it going to take? Obviously, analyzed and scrutinized within an inch of their life footprints are not enough for Sasquatch, which is weird. We'll do it for other species. It could be a species completely unknown to us, and we will accept it's a real species. 5 fossilized footprints were discovered in 1976 in Tanzania along another line of prints known to be those of Australopithecus afarensis. They quickly dismissed these others to be those of a bear walking on its hind legs because they obviously weren't those of A. afarensis, and A. afarensis had long been assumed to have been the only human species around at that time. Recent discoveries now say otherwise, but in 1976, upon the discovery of these 5 random prints, this is what was thought. Just some bear prints. Bears lived in Africa back then, no biggie. Brush them off. But in 2019, when the site was fully excavated and the 5 prints were cleaned, measured, photographed, and 3D scanned, and they were compared to actual bear prints, researchers realized they weren't that. They were human-like. They were not A. afarensis, but they were definitely those of an upright walking hominid who walked the same area alongside A. afarensis. Maybe within hours of each other, it could be speculated. But to this day, scientists still do not know what species made these prints. They have nothing else like these on record, and all they have are these prints. But they are undeniable evidence, and scientists accept that these are indeed the imprints of an ancient early hominid, sight unseen. So what is it going to take for Sasquatch? Definitely not stories or even photos. And that is weird, because we've done that for other animal species. In 2003, Tim Davenport of the Tanzanian Wildlife Conservation Society, all roads lead to Tanzania, apparently. Tim Davenport heard the local Wanyakyusa people talking about this shy little monkey called a kapunji. He was intrigued and wanted to know if there was anything to the stories. Later that year, he and his team would lay eyes on this creature, and in 2005 would publish a paper in a scientific publication describing and naming the new species. However, they were missing a pretty big piece of the naming game puzzle when it came down to it: a type specimen. Under holotype, they wrote adult male in photograph, figure 2. Under paratype, they wrote adult in photograph, figure 3. They also state in this paper no live individual should be collected at this time to serve as the holotype. Didn't provide a body. Paper got published. Upon publication, there was a stir in the scientific readership. The official name Lophocebus kapunji had no standing in zoology because technically they didn't have an actual body, a type specimen. It couldn't be recognized until that took place. It was then pointed out, in response to all holotype criticisms, that the International Code of Zoological Nomenclature does actually include an article that would allow recognition of taxa sans holotype. And this is the article this person was referring to. Article 73.1.4. Designation of an illustration of a single specimen as a holotype is to be treated as designation of the specimen illustrated. The fact that the specimen no longer exists or cannot be traced does not of itself invalidate the designation. 2 points on this. First point I'm trying to make is this: Davenport heard stories about an animal that by all accounts did not exist. Based on those stories, he began looking. Upon looking, he spotted one. And upon spotting one, he snapped a picture and used it for evidence in his published work, scientifically naming the monkey. The species was initially accepted based on stories and photo evidence. Second point is there are arguments to be made that the article I just read is meant to apply only to type specimens that have been lost, and an original type specimen is still necessary. I mean, that's not what it says, but okay. Even if that is the case, Grover Krantz was never claiming Sasquatch to be an undiscovered brand new species. Quite the contrary. He was simply asking that an animal who matched the description of one we do have physical remains for, teeth and jawbones, be given its official name back. His proposal abided by these very rules. So, what is it gonna take? Welcome back to the Paranorm Girl Podcast. I am your host, Kristen. Welcome to the season 6 finale and conclusion. On this final episode of the season, we are going to revisit a few points made over the course of the last year, some new thoughts that I've not included until now, some end of season shout outs per usual, and then of course my final conclusion on the phenomenon that is Bigfoot based on all that I have learned along the way. It's not until the conclusion episode rolls around that I embarrassingly must admit that I left some important stuff on the table. I must still carry on and make my final decision, though. Them's the rules. But I do like to acknowledge that I am not Superwoman. I can only cram so much into a season, and sometimes your girl just forgets or learns of something far too late. I announced very early on that I had scheduled a time to go meet up with Dr. Meldrum at his lab. I would end up getting to meet him and talk with him at Squatch Fest a little later, but unfortunately, a week before I was set to head on down to Pocatello, Dr. Meldrum fell ill on a Sasquatch cruise that he was speaking at, and he was going to be out of the saddle for an undetermined amount of time. I do hope to make it down to see him in the future, just could not find the opportunity to fit it in this season. The Patterson-Gimlin film, I didn't talk about the PGF, one of the most important events in Sasquatch history. No, I did not. I had planned to. Even had the episode name picked out. 2 men, 1 film. I know. Perfect, right? But the dealio is, there are a lot of pieces of the Bigfoot subject that get lost in the mix and end up not receiving the spotlight that they probably should. The Patterson-Gimlin film is not one of those pieces. It's going to be one of the first results to pop up if you go to plug Bigfoot into Google or YouTube, and countless other podcasts have done excellent work relaying all of the ins and outs of the film and surrounding events. When it came time to dig into it, I felt it just didn't need the Paranorm Girl treatment. You know? Bigfoot around the world. This is not just a North American phenomenon. It's a worldwide phenomenon. And there are far more versions, descriptions, and names for it than you might imagine in countries across the globe. It both fascinates and frustrates me as someone trying to make sense of it, because now the net is even wider, the statistics even larger, and yet no discovery of remains. I have questions, but I will have to wait to take a closer look at these global reports. One thought that I did have on this that I'll share here, a lot of people already have a hard time grasping that Bigfoot exists outside of the Pacific Northwest. Suffice it to say, many folks don't believe that any stories coming from outside of the country could be valid. They can't really come to terms or make sense of how it could be the case that a version of Bigfoot exists everywhere. That's not really the case for many known animals, right? Personally, I don't think it's so crazy to consider this could be the case. Yes, many animals evolved to adapt to certain climates and conditions, and you would never find them in opposite conditions. But then again, humans literally inhabit every possible condition the earth has to offer. Are we so egotistical to think no other animal can be as adaptable as us? I don't know. I also was really intrigued by the Sasquatch Genome Project. I did mention this project a few times throughout the information, spoke a little bit about their actual findings, but their work goes really deep, and I'm totally bummed about this, that I couldn't fit it in, for a closer look at it. I have serious FOMO when it comes to the subjects that I cover, but like regret instead. ROMO. I have ROMO, you guys. All right. We've tied up those loose ends. That was it. That's the list. We have acknowledged that I had to leave behind for now. So let's take a trip together and revisit some of the information we have covered this season that ultimately has brought me to my conclusion today. From the start, the plentiful evidence was clear to me. Bigfoot is not just based on its stories, as many paranormal topics are, but also a massive body of evidence that backs up those stories. And this evidence, I felt, clearly pointed to an undiscovered animal. Many animals we know today began as cryptids. They were yet to be discovered for a variety of reasons. They were located in secluded, hard-to-reach areas. Their descriptions from the locals were pretty far out there, hard to believe, and didn't necessarily inspire serious investigation into what sounded like made-up monsters. Animals like gorillas, kangaroos, and giant squid. Or they were rare, easy to miss if you are not paying attention or looking, like Asian unicorns or Saola. Since Saola's discovery 32 years ago, scientists have documented them in the wild a grand total of 4 times. Some animals are just so rare. We thought the people who talked about these creatures were nuts, but we were wrong. These people were telling the truth. Rather, these animals were just rare, elusive, hard to reach, and yet they're all along. Can we imagine the same might be the case for Sasquatch? Here at the end of the season, it's actually become very hard for me to understand how someone can see just how much evidence there is pointing to this creature's existence and then discount it. That does seem nuts to me. But like I said in the beginning, those who remain skeptical are so because they discount the evidence outright. And if they are unwilling to consider any evidence at all, then there's definitely no looking at the composite of overwhelming evidence and the picture that paints. We took a look at skeptical arguments such as, if they are out there, where is the body? Why don't we have one? Where are the bones, the fossils, etc., etc. To quickly review, fossils are stupid rare. Why? Because they require perfect conditions to form. And then they require people to actually find them. That being said, though, Krantz would say we have found their fossils. Yeah, just saying. Bones are also considerably rare to find out in the wild, especially predator and carnivore bones. Predators are more likely to experience a slow versus sudden and violent end. Enough time to find a place to curl up and try to recoup from their ailment. Just kidding, they're dead now, but hidden. And before anyone can discover their remains, they have returned to the earth, reduced to soil and new forest floor growth. Voila! Magic! No bones. Sasquatch would be considered a predator. Another reason we have not found a carcass should be considered. We actually have found one and misidentified it as belonging to another large animal. Think about this for a second. Accept that predator carcasses are already rare to come across out there. Some random hiker is walking through the woods and just happens to trip and stumble over a pile of bones. What are the chances this random hiker is going to think they belong to anything other than a bear? I don't think it's likely. And we aren't even taking into account the level of intelligence this creature may have. According to many encounters and eyewitness reports, sometimes they do things that allude to a higher than normal level of intellect. Could this higher intelligence also account for a no body left behind policy? Do they bury their dead? They would not be the first or only animal to do so. Elephants are well known for their complex social structures and emotional responses. They have also been observed covering members of their herd in leaves, branches, and dirt, and staying near the body to mourn. Magpies are incredibly intelligent birds and have also been observed staying around the deceased and placing twigs and grass on top of them. Interestingly, chimpanzees, humans' closest genetic relative, have incredible social structure and have shown to have high emotional and functional intelligence. Also has been observed staying near the area of the body and covering them with leaves and sticks. In many reports of multiples of Bigfoot being observed, it appears they do have some sort of social structure and have emotional ties and responses. Based on the pattern that I am seeing from the known animal examples, if Bigfoot bury their dead, I think it's highly likely they too would hang around the area trying to stay close to the body while they mourn. Might keep that in mind if you become aware of a Bigfoot being sighted in the same area over an extended period of time. The history of Sasquatch was really interesting. I am so glad I did this one early on. It really gave me a level place to start as I began my dive into the subject. So here is an inconvenient truth and something that blew me away. Sasquatch has been described and artistically rendered for centuries. Its name has changed throughout the years. Its name has differed from culture to culture, but it has been there all along. Sasquatch has massive historical merit. I mentioned the problem some folks have trying to imagine how Sasquatch can exist in every country across the planet. Your brain's gonna explode when I tell you Bigfoot in 1600s medieval Europe was off the chain, dudes. Numerous European countries called it something different while describing the same thing. Germany had the Wilderman, France, l'homme sauvage, Sweden had Skagsra, England the Woodwose. And at the same time, in the Americas, the native people had their own varied legends amongst the different tribes of a giant, wild, hairy man. Along with Bigfoot's very historical presence being a compelling factor for me, some of the specific historic events were extra compelling and gave me an early gauge of what kinds of reports stand out to me as genuine and why they do. I was compelled by early accounts like William Rowe's. It's an interesting story and description of the creature for sure. But I have never seen this creature. I've got nothing personal to compare William's description to. However, what I find about his story that takes it beyond doubt for me is that signed affidavit, the legal signed documentation of his testimony of what took place. I am also compelled by the 58 Bluff Creek track find and the fallout from that. And I'll be honest, I would become more convinced when I finally covered Ray Wallace's side of the whole situation during my episode on Bigfoot hoaxes. I went in ready to accept Wallace had invented Bigfoot. I came out of that one definitely not doing that. The Bluff Creek tracks were real. And Wallace had nothing to do with them. But you want to know the clincher on those tracks? What really just fills me with just overwhelming certainty that not one person has ever been able to demonstrate how those tracks were made for $100,000. Y'all, believe me, if I thought I could duplicate them, I would be banging on Willow Creek's door right now. $100,000. Is a lot of money, even today. But I can't. I have no idea how they could have been hoaxed. Hell, if they were hoaxed, why didn't the original hoaxer just come forward to claim the money? Easy money. You already did the prints once, just do them again. But alas, nobody could demonstrate how they were made. Compelling stuff. Another event. Paul Freeman's video capture. Some people think that Freeman was a hoaxer, full of crap, that his dermal evidence was bunk. He even admitted to creating footprints. And he did say those words. You can watch the clip of him saying so during a televised interview. You will not be getting the entire story behind why he was saying that, though. Cliff Barrickman has publicly admitted to faking footprints, too, for the same reasons. To test a hypothesis. Can footprints that contain details like dermal ridges and mid-tarsal breaks be faked? How would someone fake the unique details of a living foot in motion in a long track line, each print individual and unique from the rest. Can it be done? I've talked about Freeman a few times during this season. I have read his son's book. I really would have loved to have had Michael on the show. Got to meet him at Squatch Fest, and he's a super dude, very nice. I did reach out to invite him on to talk about his dad and his book, and he did respond. However, we just could not get that set up, and I'm not ever going to be one to like pester people to come on. I do not need to do that. Ain't nobody got time for that. But back to his father and his evidence and work. I believe Freeman. I think his evidence is genuine. I think his film is severely underrated and unfairly discounted. I find it to be just as compelling, if not more so, than the PGF. And I just want to reiterate something I said in the history episode about how lucky he seemed to be. Nobody gets that much evidence, right? Nobody has that many sightings, right? Yeah. Something that Freeman does not get credited for is the life he gave up in order to continue the search. The time he sacrificed with his kids and his wife, he would never get back. The jobs he would never have because of his notoriety, because of the commitment to the pursuit. People don't credit his finds to the multiple days a week, multiple hours a day he spent out there in the wild, specifically looking for evidence. They credit it to luck or deception. There was no luck about it. It came down to math. If you spend 10,000 hours doing anything, you are considered an expert at that thing. If you spend 10,000 hours looking for Sasquatch or evidence of it, you are more likely to find it. He took it seriously and took it on in a way that bordered obsession, you know? Not like, oh my God, Sasquatch. I love Sasquatch. I'm like so obsessed. No. Like celebrity stalker level obsession. All right? I don't think he provided fake evidence ever, because he quite literally did not need to do that, because there ain't nothing like the real thing, baby, which he had, because he looked for it in ways not a lot of other folks were willing to look for it. So suffice it to say, Freeman's video and dermal evidence compels me. So by the time we hit the end of the History of Sasquatch episode, we knew that Sasquatch has history. It's not just a localized phenomenon. People's inherent greed is not enough for them to magically somehow duplicate tracks considered to be the real deal. And there are folks willing to sign legal documents and commit the rest of their lives to the search because of something that they witnessed. We were in the early stages of painting this composite sketch of Bigfoot. But at that point, we hadn't yet looked specifically at the signs and evidence in the modern era. The specific details that has turned skeptics like Paul Freeman, John Green, Grover Krantz, Dr. Meldrum into proponents. Let's revisit some of that information now. How can people still believe that Sasquatch is real? Simple. Evidence. Just as detectives look for clues they can piece together in order to tie a perp to the crime scene, so do Bigfoot investigators. Unsurprisingly, the insane amount of evidence that Bigfoot creates would be more than enough to convict. Slam dunk case. As Beans Baxter told me of his prior law enforcement days, he had put criminals away behind bars with nothing more than an eyewitness account and some grainy footage. But folks with minds already made up do not seem willing to learn what the evidence is, let alone what it's saying. But I was willing. Here is evidence that I have been most compelled by and why. First, eyewitness testimony. It would be one thing if we were dealing with a small amount of reports scattered all over the place in strange areas, doing strange things with strange differences in behaviors and physical traits. But there are thousands of eyewitness reports. A majority are found where you would expect to find a wild thing, in or near the woods. They are often described in similar ways, with a difference only in height, weight, and fur color, and rarely include exaggerated details of monstrosity as one might expect from the depths of someone's imagination, like claws and fangs. Thousands of reports describe this bipedal, tall, bulky, hairy creature in a wooded area, basically just going about its business. There have been reports of aggression, which might stand out, but as we learned from our Salty Sasquatch episode, it's a handful in comparison to the mountain of reported sightings. Second, the hairy man and his hairy family at Painted Rock. And this dips back into the history, but it has not ceased to amaze me, the native lore and their artistic and ceremonial creations that present what appears to be a very large and hairy bipedal thing, or something that appears to have an ape-like face on totem poles, ceremonial masks, stone carvings, and wall paintings, alongside human beings and other physical animals. It stands out, no doubt. But why include this one fictional creature in the midst of foxes, ravens, bears, and man? Third, footprints. Bigfooters will shout from the rooftops about footprint evidence for very good reasons. There is a lot to a footprint thought to be real that cannot be explained in any other way. Or it has been explained in such outlandish ways that it makes my brain hurt. And at that point, it's just clear, like, no one would do that. Nobody is doing that. Okay. Is it easy to hoax footprints that convince many? Yes. Ask Eugene Hendrick. Is it easy to hoax footprints that convince Bigfoot researchers and investigators who know what to look for? Not as easy. It has happened. Grover Krantz was once duped by a print made in cat litter, I think, and then doubled down when told it was fake and how it was made because, pride. We can forgive Grover for that one example. It was one footprint cast without the context of the rest of the track line or being able to see the location wherein it was found. Other clues at a print site will help point to whether or not a footprint is valid, not always just what is found in the print itself. So it's really important to be able to see that whole picture. Considering the only argument a skeptic has in regards to an unmistakably human-like footprint find is hoaxery, because looking at it from their point of view, nothing else could have created this print but a person, reminded me of my look at crop circles. Stay with me. So just as with footprints, Colin Andrews knew what to look for and how to distinguish between real and hoaxed crop circles. There were unmistakable clues, a certain level of radiation, perfect dimensions and measurements, the stalks being bent, not broken, compared to the trampled mess of a hoaxer, cross-directional layers upon layers, field-wide designs somehow being laid in the wee hours of the night, with zero footprints or tracks of trespassers in or out to be found. Many were hoaxed. That's just the truth. But some remain a mystery to this day, with not a soul fessing up or accepting the money to recreate their hoax. Sounds familiar. There were many signs to spot a hoaxed circle, one of the most obvious being the circle itself being placed where it was sure to attract a lot of attention and quickly. Because though there was more going on with a few of the circle makers, including being compelled almost against their will to do them, these makers wanted their work to be found. They wanted the reaction, admiration, recognition, as you would expect with a hoaxer. Thousands of footprints and trackways have been documented. Many have been discovered by chance because they were out in remote areas of the forest, not easily accessible. Case in point, Doug Hychek, who recently appeared on the show, link in the notes, told us about the first tracks he ever came upon while up in the Arctic to do wildlife research. This area was so remote he had to take a float plane in and out. He suddenly spotted a line of pristine, deep footprints walking away from the water. He followed the line until they reached a tree stump and could see clearly that these human-like prints did not break stride, stepping over the stump and continuing forward. Off in the distance, he could see the track maker had just continued their trek off into the remote, secluded Arctic wilderness. Can you put this hoaxer in your mind's eye? Remember, if we are being skeptical, these pristine, deep, human-like footprints could only be made by a person, right? Imagine with me. Let's say it's a dude, some dude. This dude has a plane drop him off in the middle of the Arctic directly into the water because there were no footprints going into the water, just out. While in the water, he's got to strap on his fake Bigfoot feet. Now, keep in mind, he's also got to tread water like crazy because of the extra 100 pounds he's got in his pockets, to account for the depth of the tracks that are discovered later. He makes his way to shore and begins his hoax. The whole time grinning ear to ear, shaking his head, thinking, ooh, man, whoever finds these tracks is going to be so tricked. I'm going to blow their mind. They deserve it. How stupid you got to be to believe in Bigfoot. As he sloshes out of the water onto the sand. Slowly, the extra weight, remember? Clump, clump, clump. Uh-oh, a stump. Thankfully, I arrived with stilts to easily step over it without breaking my stride. Gosh, these Bigfooters are ridiculous. They'll believe anything. Clump, clump, clump. A mile later, boy, I hope I don't get attacked by a bear or anything with these feet on. I'll probably have to circle out even further so I can get back to the opposite side of the lake to catch my ride out so nobody sees my tracks out of here. Is that hypothermia setting in? This was so totally worth it. Stupid booger-eating Bigfooters. Thank you very much. I appreciate you guys humoring me. Let's talk about the print details. What makes a print thought to be real so dang special? Dermal ridges have been discovered in numerous print finds. Dermal ridges are a functional adaptation on the hands and feet of just a handful of creatures of this planet. Dermals aid in climbing, grasping, manipulating objects, and navigating complex terrain. Though humans are the most well-known for having these unique patterns, many primates have something similar. Chimps, gorillas, orangutans, and various species of monkeys and lemurs also exhibit these designs. They can be found in a very, very small number of other creatures, but not to the extent that they are found in primates. The way Sasquatch has been described It undoubtedly has primate features. Along with dermals, sweat pores can also be found. The presence of sweat pores on the hands and feet is also a common feature among primates and plays an important role in thermoregulation. Just imagine the importance of that in a massive fur-covered body. A very special feature, often spotted, is the mid-tarsal break. This is a trait typically associated with non-human primates, such as great apes. This feature involves the middle of the foot, where the bones and joints can allow for greater flexibility. It's thought to be related to arboreal or tree-dwelling lifestyles. However, can be seen in the gorilla, who spends most of its time on the ground. Depth of prints. How far a footprint is sunk into the ground can be easily overlooked by someone who doesn't understand what it is saying about the body that left it there. While prints found in mud and snow can be very exciting to come across, the most impressive finds are deep prints in dry, hard, rocky soil. A print's size and shape may be duplicated. Much harder to duplicate how deep it goes. Depth discoveries have required weights upwards of 300 pounds of force, especially considering the wider, flatter surface of the bottom of this foot. If someone is clomping around out in the woods in large, fake, flat-bottomed feet, they're going to have a hell of a time getting those to sink where they should be to reflect a body size and mass that would belong to such large feet. In one of my middle school science classes, we watched a demonstration of how someone can lay on a board of nails without so much as a drop of blood. Due to the distribution of weight across all points of contact, there is less force on each individual point. You lay on one nail, that's going to hurt. 100 nails, you're going to be fine, so long as you evenly distribute your weight across them. Same with prints. A hoaxer is taking their average of, let's say, 180 pounds, if it's a guy, distributing this weight onto a flat stepping surface that is much wider and longer than belongs on their regular stepping surface. Their own foot is going to sink deeper than anything that they can make with this wider, longer surface, unless they can add an excessive amount of weight to their body in order to apply more force. Imagine doing this in the woods, in the dark, across rocky, uneven terrain, up hills, down hills, toss a 700-pound tire around, some 50-gallon drums of fuel into a ravine. You will be $100,000 richer, my dude. But imagine doing all of that with the weight it would take to sink the print to an appropriate depth. Last one on prints, and then we will move on. Unique traits of a living foot. This is an umbrella of traits like deformities, such as can be seen in the cripple foot tracks, Grover Krantz's paradigm shift, scars, missing digits, unique traits like the imprint of a toe or fingernail, signs of malleable skin, molding around hard objects like sticks and rocks. A stiff, fake surface cannot mold itself around anything. A malleable surface is also going to give you a track line where no two prints are exactly alike. Each print is a special little snowflake, which is what you would want to see in a long trackway. The spacing between prints is another unique trait. This also says something about the body that made them, their height, age, or gender even. Also take note of the gait. It is unique in that it's only seen naturally in animal and purported Sasquatch tracks. Humans evolved to walk in a stiff-legged gait for energy efficiency. But compliant gaits with feet placed in a line rather than on their respective hip sides are seen in many animals and are characterized by greater flexibility. which would make sense when considering bipedalism in rough or uneven terrain. Sometimes, based on unique features of a given foot, researchers have actually been able to track and document specific individuals over time, which is pretty cool. These pieces of evidence are what compels me the most. But being able to add other evidence like possible poop, blood, and hair samples, or to hear a call that you don't recognize, a wood knock, to have a rock inexplicably thrown at you through the trees, or even to smell something absolutely horrendous and offensive, would just be icing on the cake. But it all points toward Sasquatch. How can people still believe Sasquatch is real? How can you not, with so much evidence saying it is? By the way, the mystery prints discovered in Tanzania, the ones I talked about at the top of the show, the ones that do not belong to any species we are yet aware of, while they were smaller, originally brushed off as those of a young bear, though they were smaller, they were wide and bore another striking difference to the Australopithecus prints found. These prints walked in what was described by paleoanthropologist Jeremy De Silva as a cross-stepping gait. The trackway consists of 5 consecutive bipedal footprints, but the left foot is crossing over the right and vice versa. We aren't sure what this means yet. Cross-stepping sometimes occurs in humans when we are walking on uneven ground. Perhaps that explains this odd gait. Or perhaps this individual hominin walked in a peculiar manner. Or maybe an unknown species of hominin was adapted to walk in this way. I'm not saying this is Bigfoot. I am not saying that at all. But I am saying this is an incredible, undeniable scientific discovery that points to something other than what we have historically thought to be human ancestors that walked bipedally alongside Australopithecus and used a damn near compliant gait rather than the gait of those human ancestors. This discovery blows the evolution of what it means to be a biped out of the water. This discovery spits in the face of the very gait we used to walk. Scientists do not know what species made these prints, but it's an incredible and exciting, mysterious find. And yet, here we currently sit on a mountain of evidence because the possibility of an undiscovered animal that thousands have seen is just too far-fetched. Again, I ask, what is it going to take? Let's take a mental breather and a moment to recognize some awesome folks and their contributions to the show over the course of this season. First and foremost, the patrons. Your guys' constant support and contribution to research materials, new equipment, public appearances, and events is above and beyond. I really appreciate you guys so much. You guys have kept me motivated and on track this season. David A. supports the show directly through my hosting website. This includes you too, my dear. Thank you guys so much. My co-hosts on Beer, Booze, and Boogeymen, Gil, Joey, and Damien. You guys are more than my co-hosts. You have become some of the best friends that I have made in a while, dudes. And your help, support, humor, ideas, your talents comes quickly and effortlessly. I don't know what I did to deserve y'all. Thank you to my guests this season. Holy cow. I had no clue I could get such cool people to come talk with me. There are many of you. So I have relisted your episodes in the show notes, and all of you will be listed during today's video credits. A final shout out to individuals who made an impact. Reeves Cook, with the Halloween special. Thank you so much, Jason Cordova, for inviting me to be a member of the Society for Arcane Studies and setting up my chat with Alejandro Rojas. Very cool dude. And Air Force One, you know you rock hard, my friend, for all of the reasons. I am keeping the shout-outs this season super short, but for everyone else who contributed, messaged me, sent me links and guest ideas, offered to help, or anything else, you are so appreciated. I run a solo ship over here, and it does get rough. Even the smallest of kind words of encouragement never goes unnoticed by moi, and I thank you. All right, break's over. Back to work. I explored the various Sasquatches described and encountered across the nation. Due to the consistency throughout the descriptions and behaviors, I do believe them to be more widespread within our own country. Not all of them. As I recall, someone said they saw one with fluorescent green hair, and some had fangs and claws. But for the rest, I'm seeing the pattern. I'm digging the pattern. And I don't see any valid reason why they can't be located in other densely forested areas across the country. And I still want my very own Git Stick. Dang it. In these American Sasquatch episodes, we also saw an interesting physical feature described quite a few times. It has also popped up in our history dive, our military and police encounters, our theories and explanations episode. And in so doing, it in itself is too much of a pattern for me to continue to brush aside. I'm going to have to confront this glowing eyes thing. Within our current scope of understanding of biology, there are no animals on planet Earth whose eyes are bioluminescent, eyes that glow. Certain deep-sea creatures have fluorescent features and even organs near their eyes that can make them appear to glow, but no eyeballs that we know of produce their own glow. I threw around the idea that glowing eyes in these creatures may be an evolutionary adaptation for protection or aggressive behaviors, to ward off predators, to, in a sense, bluff charge intruders. In theory, I think this is a fun idea. But considering the fact that while glowing eyes is a feature that has been reported, it still isn't reported regularly enough to call this for the entire species. For every glowing eyes encounter, there is an habituation with a family of Bigfoot for years who has never seen glowing eyes, but do report regular old eye shine. Glowing eyes is something you get with shadow people and Hat Man and other solely paranormal entities. I think what is happening instead is they do have a unique trait that has evolved and been highly tuned over the course of centuries. All traits that we have today evolved to be the way they are because it was better. It helped our species survive. It gives us the advantage. I think Sasquatch has a specially adapted tapetum lucidum. I knew I was going to stumble over that. It's a hard one to pronounce. I think I am pronouncing that correctly. Tapetum lucidum, which is the layer of many animals' eyes that reflects light back at you. Depending on the animal, this layer can reflect back different colors, including green, blue, yellow, orange, and red. Sound familiar? Again, I think this is a trait that is far more evolved in these creatures. So much so, they are reflecting back different colors depending on the light that their eyes are picking up. Would explain how folks see them with different colored glowing eyes. One last time, I think this trait is so highly evolved in these creatures that even when the witness says there was no light source to reflect, these layers in these creatures' eyes are so sensitive, they can pick up the slightest, smallest source of light. If you have ever been somewhere you would call pitch darkness, but then you slowly become accustomed to the darkness and you're able to start picking up the slightest shapes and movements in your surroundings as your eyes adjust. Even if you can just barely make out something next to you, that means there is a light source, ambient or otherwise. Light is pervasive, and it may be so dim you don't think it's there, but dim light is still present light, and their eyes are catching it. Many predators and nocturnal animals have a tapetum lucidum. It's a remarkable adaptation that enhances their visual capabilities in low light environments, which contributes to survival of a nocturnal or crepuscular lifestyle. And if Bigfoot is as elusive as I think it is, this is just the truth of it. It is nocturnal. It has to be. It has highly sensitive eyes that has allowed it to exist in the darkest of dark. And this has helped it to survive. And a major part of that is avoidance of day-dwelling humans. Thinking about this got me looking at other animals who have special perception traits that are unusual compared to others. That gives them the advantage. Cats can hear frequencies that humans cannot. They have the ability to see different levels of light on the spectrum than humans do. They've evolved to do this. There is evidence suggesting that cats might even be able to see ultraviolet light. This ability would enhance their predatory skills and environmental awareness, offering a functional advantage in their natural behavior. And if this were the case for Bigfoot, what's more of a functional advantage than steering clear of your one and only threat at all times? Have they also evolved to sense ultraviolet light? Can they visually sense body heat? This adaptation would completely explain to me how they avoid humans generally. And trail cam capture. I've heard people say that they're hearing it. I think that their hearing has highly evolved, much the same as their vision. So this is incredibly possible. Could they also be seeing the electromagnetic frequency this electronic device is putting out? Can they see it through the trees like the Predator movies? Suffice it to say, when man is in the forest, I believe they already know you are there. They hear you a million miles away, they smell you a million miles away, and they can see you through the trees, thickest of thickets, as they stand perfectly still. And you go naively about your clumsy, hairless ape business. Their hide-and-seek game is on point because of these features. I discussed photo and video captures. Sasquatch. I'll reiterate. I believe Freeman's film to be the real deal. I also believe the Patterson-Gimlin film to be legit. Stacy Brown Jr. and Sr.'s thermal capture as well. The Independence Day footage can kick rocks. Aggressive, temperamental, at times violent Sasquatch. Want to note this one again and elaborate in context of what my final conclusion is going to be. Salty, nasty Bigfoot encounters have been reported, but are so highly outnumbered by reports that are just not that at all. That it's not something I think anybody should be overly concerned with. The legend of the Nantinaq in Portlock, Alaska, is probably one of the most extreme cases of violent Bigfoot that I have ever heard. A lot of deaths and damage were attributed to this creature of native lore in the area. People went missing, body parts washed up on shores. No one actually saw a Bigfoot killing, hunting, maiming, destroying anything. anything. Is it fair to connect the two? I don't know. Maybe should we be considering their massive bear population instead? I don't know. I won't sit here and say the Nantinaq did not do all of those things, but still worth pondering whether the myth has outgrown the monster with that one. But considering all other cases I have come across of a temperamental nature, I would just advise you, moving forward, if you find yourself in a surprise face-to-face encounter with a Sasquatch, chances are high they want nothing to do with you and are going to skedaddle, and quickly. You should treat the encounter with care and caution as you would any other wild animal. The end. I was highly compelled by the examples of military, police, and other government officials' encounters with Bigfoot. There is no denying hearing a story of this nature from someone who, by all accounts, should not be telling it if this animal were only mythical in nature is a pretty big deal. What's more, many of these types of encounters are a first for people claiming that they were skeptics to begin with. Easy to be a black and white skeptic until you are faced with this kind of blow to your reality. Many more of these kinds of encounters have gone unreported for the reasons I mentioned in that episode: embarrassment, fear of ridicule, fear of damage to reputation and career. But the ones who came forward did the only thing they knew how to do: report what they saw, describe it in detail, doing what they have been professionally trained to do. As much as I was compelled at this point in the season, though, it's always a smart move to reality check yourself. Bring the subject back to a level playing field and give yourself some perspective. Hoaxery is a major time suck in the ongoing investigation into this cryptid. But just because it is taking place, does that explain the entire phenomenon? Not even close. I certainly did not find that to be the case when I took my close look at Bigfoot hoaxes. In the grand scheme of things, the greatest harm hoaxery does to the phenomenon is not the members of the public who will now not be drawn to the subject, but the scientific establishment who won't, the possible future funding, the biologists who could be testing the samples and publishing the papers, and the conservation efforts to save the home of a possibly endangered species roaming around out there. But there is still hope that these things may yet happen. Lots of movement going on behind the scenes. The skeptical and the scientific are still drawn to this field quietly, despite the ongoing hoaxery and fake tracks. Incredible groups like ZooBook gives these people a place to do this kind of work anonymously. Movers and shakers like Doug Hychek, who bring outrageous findings to the public. People have to arrive at this subject on their own terms. On the face of it, it is not an easy pill to swallow, especially if you are aware of all of the hoaxes. But all it can take is one piece of evidence to make a former skeptic of it go, whoa, hold up, right? They require their own paradigm shift. Luckily enough, there's a whole lot to choose from. And speaking of that, I want to hear from you. I would be curious to hear from you guys. What was yours? What piece of film, what event, what body of evidence or find did it for you? Changed your mind? Shoot me an email, paranormgirlpod@gmail.com, or message me on social at paranormgirlpod. I would love to, do something with your answers. I'd love to put your answers on like a Bigfoot art piece. Wouldn't that be cool? Oh, maybe we could commission Timothy Wayne Williams to do it. That would be hella dope, dudes. All right. Final thing before I head into the actual conclusion portion of this episode and wrap up the show. let's revisit the theories behind Sasquatch. Gigantopithecus is the most popular explanation. We've got, it's not giganto, but still an undiscovered great ape, undiscovered animal. It's human, wild human, different species of human. Then we take a bit of a leap where this creature becomes a bit less physical. It is interdimensional in nature. It's created by or is itself alien. It's a ghost, an entity. It's Nephilim of the Bible, or it is jinn of the Quran. There's tons of evidence to support the Gigantopithecus or undiscovered animal explanations. Overwhelming evidence compared to the rest. The rest, though, I completely get because they provide answers to questions that a biological creature does not. Even the theory that it is human or of human. If you look specifically at any event that included a gun and an opportunity to shoot, either the person did shoot or they said something I have repeated multiple times this season because it kind of sticks out. They couldn't shoot because it looked too human. And I have no doubt that it does. But I have to wonder if those folks might have been experiencing a bit of uncanny valley. Now, reportees who get a good visual of the face, it's a little split down the middle. Some will describe it looking like it has a human face, while others will describe it looking more ape-like. I think this it's human theory in large part boils down to individual psychology and empathy. Not that folks who see an ape-like face are not kind, empathetic people. I just mean, what is the extent that you see yourself in things outside of yourself? How much do you relate to things foreign to you? I cannot be the only person who watches videos of chimpanzees or gorillas and is just waiting for them to start speaking. Like, I see human in their faces. Is that weird? Am I weird? Their expressions, their eyes, the hands, specifically, their hands, you guys. We share traits with them. I see us in them and vice versa. And if you had never seen a gorilla before and you asked me to describe its face, I would without a doubt tell you that it looks kind of like a person's face. Kind of. Bigger brow, wider eyes, pushed out lips, broad nose, dark skin. So we can see how the human argument is valid in the way that they look. We might also see it in a language. We can argue that the Sierra Sounds is a conversation that contains language. From what I have heard and read about these sounds, I think it's a language in the way that dolphins and whales and crows and cats have a language. They literally do. They communicate wants, needs, emotions, upsets, directions, but this does not make them human. The alien theory threw me. I did have to grapple with that for a minute. Bigfoot and UFOs have been seen together. Sometimes, infrequently. But there was a correlation that Stan Gordon was seeing in Pennsylvania, and he documented it. Look, I'm a proponent of UFOs and aliens. I landed pretty solidly on their existence last season, but I have just spent the good part of a year investigating Sasquatch. I have lost count of the number of reports that I personally read, but I can assure you it is in the hundreds. Hundreds of reports. Not one that I came upon naturally had a UFO included in its details. Those I specifically had to search out. If there is a connection there, I cannot find it. There just wasn't a big enough sampling to go on. Perhaps more of that information will become apparent to me in the future. Even though the season and the deep dive on Sasquatch ends on this show, This topic is now in my wheelhouse, dudes. The search for more information will never stop for me. I can't help it. It's just what I do. The interdimensional argument can go hand in hand with the alien argument, or it can stand on its own. Let's just consider it on its own. I also get why this is the place folks land. In the past, I have landed here myself on various topics that I have covered. Aliens, shadow people, whatever my reasoning at the time, based on the information I had, it's been the most reasonable explanation behind the inexplicable aspects of those phenomena. For Sasquatch, these inexplicable aspects include our inability to find a body. What is happening to their dead? Are they pulling them back through the portal, back into their own dimension? Also, how do they disappear so quickly? It's like they can just up and vanish. Some people have claimed to witness them literally vanish or go transparent right in front of their eyes. I have not naturally come across these types of reports either, and can only speculate based on the information I am currently aware of. To explain why I do not think Sasquatch is nor can be traversing portals between dimensions or is in itself just interdimensional with or without a portal, let's get nerdy, okay? Currently, we are aware of 3 dimensions of space and 1 of time. We exist in a 3-dimensional reality with time. For there to be such a thing as interdimensional, there must be more dimensions, of which we are just not yet aware. String theory suggests there are actually 10 dimensions. The extra dimensions may include all possible futures, all possible pasts, and realities that abide by different rules of physics than our own. Non-physical realities. When I consider a creature like Sasquatch, it appears to be physical in nature. We can visually see that it abides by our physical rules. There aren't reports of Bigfoot suddenly shooting off from the ground and flying away, suddenly appearing and disappearing in our bathrooms, walking through our walls. It walks on the same level of Earth that we do. It eats physical food, leaves physical footprints behind. We have captured what appears to be a physical creature on tape. So, if it is physical in nature, then this reality is its home. This is where it belongs. The reason shadow people work as interdimensional beings is because they are not physical. They are something else. They do not abide by our rules. Aliens and UFOs are another matter entirely. Highly advanced, beyond what we think is possible for intelligence. They figured some stuff out. If you are curious to know where I arrived, season 5 finale, back to Sasquatch. The amount of reports and evidence that points to this creature being one of ours is, it's overwhelming. This would also be my reasoning behind why I don't think it's a ghost or a djinn. And aside from the description that it is a giant, I cannot speculate my way to a Nephilim connection. Upon a closer inspection of that connection, Nephilim were described in the Book of Enoch standing 300 cubits tall. A single cubit is 18 inches, putting the Nephilim at 450 feet in height. I mean, Bigfoot is tall. He ain't that tall. Though I am not landing on a supernatural opinion today, I do want to give a nod to it and leave a bit of room for future Kristen to change her mind should more information become available. Because I have to. Because there are questions that are not getting answered if we are basing our ideas of this creature solely on the biological. There is still quite a bit of mystery taking place, and it does affect a good number of people. What I am talking about are accounts that include phenomena such as mind speak, telepathy, verbal communication, Maybe this includes those instances when they are seen alongside orbs and UFOs and folks who have said, yes, I literally watched it vanish in front of my eyes. I want to put all of this woo stuff here together and give it some support. There are many who initially began skeptical of the entire phenomenon, who are brought to the field and made believers and researchers out of because they had their paradigm shift. They had an encounter. They saw that piece of evidence. They experienced something undeniable, and they can no longer deny Sasquatch to be real. Okay. Beyond this, there have been many folks brought to the field who initially began in the ape-only crowd, but found themselves transitioning to the woo crowd because of all of these types of reports that they were receiving, because of the mounting unanswerables, and because of the personal experiences with it. This season, while I did not get to speak to a ton of folks in this camp, I did get to speak to a few researchers and firsthand experiencers. And I am not going to deny that for the most part, I believe what they are telling me was their experience. Even in the woo-ness, there is consistency to it. And, if you caught the replay of my last appearance on Beer, Booze, and Boogeymen, I won Truth or Trash, y'all. My BS radar is pretty damn good. I hope more of you join in next time that we play. It was a lot of fun. Come on, lie to me, baby. Try me. Carter Bouchard. I had the pleasure of speaking with Carter Bouchard. He's got some very interesting things to say regarding the stranger side of Bigfoot. And I, for one, believe him. He specializes in habituation situations, burial research, stick structures. He also is of a woo position due to his personal experiences with it and the overwhelming number of reports containing paranormal aspects that he was receiving as an investigator with the BFRO. He would publish over 100 reports for the BFRO, and he noticed pretty early on, round about 50% of what he was receiving contained some form of woo, or just out of the norm. As an investigator, just doing his job, he would take the report and submit it, and as it was told to him. It didn't take too long before he was made aware that about a dozen or so of his reports had been tampered with, sanitized of certain woo and otherwise strange aspects. One in particular that he told me about had any reference to intellect removed. This action all by itself is cause for concern and doubt in me. Am I landing on biological today because a more convenient picture has been painted for me? Because it's not that more UFO-related sightings or squatches talking in English to each other encounters aren't out there and prevalent, but instead have been scrubbed and or hidden away, made harder to access. This is not a conspiracy, but I do have to ask, why hide information unless you have an agenda already in place? And if that is the case, then we are missing like half the story here. That means there is possibly something far more mysterious taking place with this cryptid. The experiencers in these kinds of reports cannot all just be crazy people. They can't. So, for now, I'm leaving the woo on this one open-ended. I have not answered the question. But because I have, in a sense, seen a pattern and consistency with those kinds of reports, I do have a speculation on what could possibly be taking place that I will leave you guys with today. This is going to get a little weird for some of you, but have you met me? I get weird. I do. Sometimes I go off the deep end, okay? It's enjoyable to me. When you take the time to look through reports, there's a pretty stark divide between fairly normal sounding events and not so normal sounding events, starkly divided. And since I am landing in the more reality based biological camp today, I look across that divide. I acknowledge that something real is taking place, and I don't wonder if these experiencers aren't interacting with something that is not Bigfoot at all, something else entirely. I have noticed that there is a bit of a trickster element that can take place. I have heard stories of vocal mimicry, them calling someone by name in voices that person would recognize. They can be mischievous. They have a sense of humor. The trickster archetype pops its head up across the paranormal world. It also pops up throughout human history and throughout the Earth's various cultures. It plays very heavily into fairy folklore, other supernatural creature folklore. The trickster can be found in Native American legend, medieval European folklore, African cultures, Greek mythology, and so on and so forth. I was introduced to this trickster element not as a concept, but as an actual entity in my last season. It's something I hadn't really considered before that, but upon learning about it, I could clearly see it reflected in the subjects I had already covered. This entity doesn't have a name, except for whatever cultures throughout history have given it temporarily. Whatever it is, it seems to be indelibly tied or linked to humans and our lives. It's adaptable and mischievous. It takes many forms to suit its purposes because it in itself has no form. It appears however it needs you to perceive it. This is not my final answer on this, but it is something that I have considered to explain the abnormal occurrences when it comes to Sasquatch. All right, come back to reality with me. That wasn't too bad. Come on. Gather round now. My final conclusion on Bigfoot in a normal sense will be quick and painless, I promise you. The evidence is in favor of it being an undiscovered animal. Gigantopithecus crossed the Bering Land Bridge along with humans and many other animals. Just as we are descended of Australopithecus afarensis, I think likely they are a descendant of that species. They are incredibly rare and highly elusive. They have evolved to specifically avoid humanity. There exists no bigger threat to them. Luckily for them, we are easy to spot. They also have highly adapted senses of smell, sight, and hearing, which aids them in this endeavor. And they bury their dead, which is why we cannot find a body. Next to impossible would be the day you stumble across a Bigfoot carcass out in the middle of nowhere and also know what you are looking at. Imagine having the idea to start digging for one. Where would you even begin? They are opportunistic, omnivorous predators. I do think they use infrasound to stun or confuse prey. This could also explain the state of shock that people experience when faced with them. They are highly intelligent and emotive and can communicate amongst each other in a variety of ways, including grunts, howls, clicks, teeth chatter, moans, etc., all strung together like a language. Whistling, tree knocking, and stick structures are another level to their communications. They are generally peaceful creatures, but with territories and family units to protect. Woe be the person who does not take the hint with rocks thrown, growls, and bluff charges. You were warned. Just as there are many different races of people across this planet, there are varieties of Sasquatch across the country, and the world. And just as there are many different personalities that can be seen in a group of chimpanzees or gorillas or people, some individual Sasquatches are going to be less docile and understanding than others. If I did not answer a question that you have about this creature with my concluded answer of the season, please send it to me. Let me think about it. I encourage you to challenge me. This will wrap our season on Bigfoot. I hope you learned something that you'd never heard before. I certainly did. Next season, Season 7, we will be investigating ghosts and hauntings. Give it the old Paranorm Girl try. If you have a suggestion for an episode that falls in line with the subject, something you would like to see your girl take completely apart and ultimately add to the accruing evidence for that season's conclusion, by all means, please email me. I've already gotten one special request. I shall be incorporating ghost lights. Ooh, spookylicious. For the last time this season, please join me for a final note. That's Bart. So, my sister says that she had a Bigfoot sighting. Do you believe it? The brat? I was pretty sure my family was Bigfoot sighting-less. Funny enough, she says I was right beside her when she saw it. See? Even when I'm looking right at it, I didn't see a thing. I didn't see anything. As she tells it, we were young at the time. I mean, obviously. Riding our bikes on the main street. And this main street would take like a sharp right turn at the end of the block. And then it went for like another mile through the forest until it hit the highway. We lived in Montana. Nothing but woods as far as you could see. Though this main street took this sharp turn, if you were to continue straight forward at the turn, you would end up on this small, like, dirt bike path thing, just through the woods. And as we pedaled toward it, she says she saw something big, brown, and fuzzy, walking like a person, about 50 yards away. Again, she was young, thinking back. I know it's hard to estimate, like, distance, but when I asked her to make her best guess, yeah, she was like, it's like half a football field, which is a good stretch. But she says this thing was so big. She could see it clearly, had a straight shot. And she watched it as it came from the woodline off to the right, took a step into the path, and then disappeared into the woodline off to the left. Her sighting lasted less than 2 seconds. She's 35 now, and this memory is still with her. Had an impact. And I believe her. There's no more to the story. That's it. I wanted to share it with you guys. I am slightly irked, slightly irritated. I didn't get to see it, but, count yourself lucky if you have. Not everyone gets to. Even people who spend their entire lives looking, not even a horseman of Sasquatchery, gets special access. I just think maybe sometimes you don't find Bigfoot. Rather, Bigfoot finds you. My good people, the Paranorm Girl Podcast is going on hiatus until September 3rd. I have a special limited spooky story series lined up for you, though, in the interim. I mentioned a little while back, while I was a vendor at the Tombstone Wild West Paracon, I was honored to have a bunch of folks take a seat at my table and record their spooky tales to be played later on the show. That later begins now. Keep your eyes out for that summer hiatus bonus series. Even though I will be taking a break, I will still be reachable via the regular avenues. Find and follow on social at Paranorm Girl Pod. Email me at paranormgirlpod@gmail.com, and be sure you are subscribed to the show on YouTube. I will still be going live with Beer, Booze, and Boogeymen the first Saturday of every month. So if you miss me much, catch me over there. Our upcoming episode is streaming July 6th at 6 p.m. Central. We will be discussing favorite conspiracies and welcoming callers to bring their favorites onto the program. Also, big news, you guys. Major developments on the 3B front. Joey, Damien, Gil, and myself are meeting in person for the first time for a live-streamed event like none other. We will broadcast live from the Night House in Hopkinsville, Kentucky. Following the stream, we will be investigating said house and property, and then stay overnight in this massively haunted home. There are going to be extras, lots of extras. I'll give you some hints. Goblins. Hee. That's your first hint. Okay. Here comes another one. You ready? Edgar Casey. Ooh, intrigued yet? 3B will be shooting bonus content for donors only. That is right. We have a GoFundMe set up to help us make this meeting of worlds happen. I have never met my co-hosts of Beer, Booze, and Boogeymen in person, and I consider them like my digital brothers. Isn't that weird? Let's make this right. Contribute to the event and travel fund on GoFundMe and enjoy exclusive bonus content just for you. Just for you. Link is in the show notes. Thank you all so much for joining me this season. I hope you have an incredible summer. I'll officially see you all back here on September 3rd at the Season 7 premiere. Until then, stay safe, keep the nightlight on, and sleep with one eye open.
That's all, folks.